Welcome one, welcome all to the Amateur's Guide to Shogi. Welcome back to another recap or analysis, bit of both, mainly a recap, of what's happening in the world of Shogi. And this is the second game of the women's Meijin title match, being played between Kana Satomi and Satomi-Yamane. In this case, this game, Kana Satomi is playing black and Yamane is playing white. And if you remember from the first game, last episode, Kana Satomi is very well decorated, well-established shogi player. Been around for a while, won a bunch of things, really cool. And Yamane is the newer, the young'un, I guess you would say, who is challenging her for this major title, the major title for all of women's shogi. I guess let's just get straight into it. So, I'll quickly mention, last game was won by Kana Satomi, so she is currently 1-0 up, and this is a 5-game match, so it's first to 3 wins, so obviously Yamane wants to strike back as much as possible. Now, of course, Kana Satomi is playing black, and if you know anything about Kana Satomi at all, you know what the opening is going to be. It's gonna be Central Rook. So if you don't like Central Rook, then look away now. So we get a development of silvers, and yeah, there we go, Central Rook. Silver comes up, pawn advances, bishop advances. Why? To allow this rook to develop to here, which you will see there. So now we've got a Central Rook versus a second file Rook position. Usually this is called opposing Rook, because you've made your rook oppose what would be your opponent's static rook, something I actually play myself, quite provocative. But in this case, there is no rook to oppose, so it is just second file rook, aiming, obviously, at this very weak pawn here. And this is obviously where Kana Satomi's king is going to castle into, so trying to go for a big attack against the king's head. Meanwhile, black is simply advancing the silver, advancing this pawn, trying to make a big attack in the center, you know, very brute force tactics, but hey, it's efficient, it works. So now we get an advancement of the edge pawn. This is just a very normal, normal developing move, and the king starts castling, and this silver develops. Why is she going to castle in the middle? No, she's going to put the silver here, developing a silver and putting it in this nice position, maybe even thinking of bringing this other silver into the center, but also more importantly, defending against this pawn attack, which is currently what white is trying to do, trying to push this pawn backed by the rook. That was the reason she put the rook here. So preempting this attack by putting the silver on this nice square here, and maybe eventually allowing this knight to develop. So we get the pawn push as expected, the silver comes to defend, and the gold comes up in a castle, not Mino castle, but similar. She didn't want to waste an extra move, bringing the king one square further over and getting the silver up, because she wants to go on the attack and win this game. So now we get this gold up, allowing the king space to run into the castle, and more developing moves, getting the bishops unlocked out of the cage. This bishop comes here. It was staring at nothing, sitting on this square, so now it's taking control of this really nice open diagonal. And knight develops. We get to the silver back for whatever reason. I don't actually know. Don't ask me. Why? Don't question it. And there's this few more normal moves, setting everything up, bringing the rook up, activating it laterally, stepping the bishop back so that it's no longer in the rook's way. Just getting everything prepared for the attack on both counts. Bishop moves to a much nicer diagonal, aiming at this square here, and for the first time, white has to play... Well, she doesn't have to play a defensive move, but she plays the defensive move. So she plays the rook back here, so now it truly is an opposing rook. Obviously, protecting this pawn, it is already protected once, but there's a lot of things aiming at it. So she brings the rook back to defend this pawn, to not allow black any entry whatsoever. And the king finally starts to castle, gets safety, gets some more development, and this pawn push on the king's head, very common idea. Maybe even want to swing the rook across and just like bash into the king's head, backed up by the rook. And this rook drops back, which is just to provide more lateral movement. I was going to make an arrow this way as well, but I really don't think the rook is going this way. So yeah, more lateral movement this way, because at the moment when it was here, it was blocked in by this gold, and also just preemptively, prophylactically defending these 3 squares. Well, not this one, this is already defended twice, but these 2 squares just from any drops. So when the rook was here, these 2 squares were holes. Black could have dropped something there in the future and been really annoying, whereas this nice rook move defends the entire back rank, and that's could be very instructive for your games. In future, sometimes it's nice to actually put this rook back on the back rank, because back rank often becomes full of holes for drops for your opponent. So that's a nice concept to think about in your own games. And also, yeah, nice lateral movement. And yeah, finally, this pawn attacks on the king's head. You cannot allow that to take. That would be really bad. You could take with the gold, but that's relinquishing this square. And if you took with the king, well, that's obviously stupid. So you cannot allow this pawn to take. So it takes. Takes with the silver and places it back and kicks the silver out. Now, you might be asking yourself, if you're a beginner, I know when I was a beginner, I very often, especially with lack of explanation, a lot of English explanations don't really exist online, or you have to buy them or whatever. When, like, masters or professional players is what they're called in the shogi world, not masters, when they play these moves which seemingly just do nothing, accomplish nothing, like, you've just pushed a pawn and, takes and then you get kicked back again, like nothing has really changed. That's what I used to think. I used to be very confused when professional players used to do this, but now I see potential in this file. So what you've got to realize is that pawns are often the beginning of attacks, because they're very cheap. You can drop them in random places and annoy the hell out of your opponent. And if you lose them, if you miscalculate your attack, well, you've only lost a pawn. It's not the end of the day. So it's very nice to be able to attack merely with pawns. And I've seen games where very good players have literally just like materialized an attack out of nowhere just with pawns. It's insane. But of course, in shogi, you cannot place a pawn in a file that already has a pawn. So while this position looks the same as it was here, in reality, the big difference is this pawn is gone, as you can see, which means you can now place, or black can now place a pawn anywhere in this file anytime she wants, which is actually a big deal. You can make an attack out of that. You might see that later. I can't remember off the top of my head, probably. But more importantly, like, you haven't really lost anything. You haven't lost any tempos, but critically, you've gained a pawn in your hand. And that is a really, really valuable tool, and now you've got a place to place it, so definitely very nice attacking idea is to sack a pawn just to get a pawn in your hand. So that's why she did that. Let's move on. Pawn attacks. Should you take it? If you take it, this pawn can't go backwards, and you're allowing your opponent to likewise drop a pawn somewhere in this file. And unlike in this file, where at the moment you've kind of got nothing to aim at, here you've got like these 2 squares. Once this pawn moves, you've got this square, and that could actually be very detrimental. So she doesn't take, she just lets it sit there. It is defended by the rook. So instead, she just develops a knight, and of course white just says, well, hey, it's a free pawn. Well, not a free pawn, it's a trade of pawns, but at least now she has this nice open file in which to put a pawn. And she does that straight away. Why she put the pawn here and not here to immediately attack the rook and kick it out, I don't know. Don't ask. Just watch and enjoy. Rook moves out of the way anyway because she's anticipating this push anyway, so she doesn't want the rook to be there and lose a tempo, and also she just likes the rook to be in the center. That's That's the happy place. Central rook. That's what you do. So of course we get some more attacking ideas with these pawn advances, trying to initiate some sort of attack, some sort of opening of this side of the board. And you will see in just a moment that, piling up all the pieces, you're about to see this gold come across and the rook come across. And this king just castled a bit more. That's what that was doing. And now you see this massive pile up on this fourth file, which is now facilitated by this rook. And because of this lateral movement, Satomi-Yamane was spoilt for choice about where to put this rook. So when it's sitting here, it's pretty defensive, just defending this pawn against your opponent's attack. But here, probably not here, but here and here, it's facilitating a nice big attack. And all of these generals are coming to the party. This knight is coming to the party, the pawns are coming to the party, and this, this nice bishop with a completely open diagonal is already at the party. So by moving this rook across, she is now hoping to create a big attack on this fourth file, and you can already see all the pieces are really starting to line up here. So she manages to activate all of her pieces that way. And what we see here is more advancement of the pawn. We've got 3 vanguard pawns. And while black, meanwhile, is trying to attack as well. So we've got an attack and a counter-attack. No defense going on over here. Why would you defend when you can attack? But of course, this attack is faster than this attack, so we've got to deal with this first. Now, you've got 3 ways of taking this. Which one is the best? I'll give you 3 seconds, or you can pause the video. Yeah, so black took with the silver. Why? Well, okay, if you take with the rook, you're just allowing this. You're allowing your opponent's silver in with an attack on the rook, and that is not happy days. If you take with the pawn, well, it's less flexible because pawns can't go backwards. This silver can. So she took with the silver. But if you justifiably came up with an idea of why you wouldn't take with the silver, which is this move, good on you. Now, before, 3 moves ago, this push was covered 2 ways. But now, with this silver move, it is now covered no ways. The rook is cut off from the defense, and the silver cannot go sideways. So if you saw that and said, I would not take with the silver, then good on you. You actually did good there. But this is, it's not devastating. It's allowable, if a bit annoying. So, of course, this pawn is now advancing, becoming the center of this attack, and it also opens up this bishop, so that's really nice. And, of course, now the silver cannot come back. So that flexibility is kind of gone. But, hey, at least this silver is now defending this pawn and, I don't know, blocking this bishop's diagonal. Anyway, we get this pawn push, so finally she gets to have her turn at the attack. You cannot let this pawn take. That would be disastrous. If takes, this would be devastating, and it's probably just lost already if you allow this to happen. If you took and then ran, that's probably better, actually, if you just make the king run away. But, hey, do you really want to let a Tolkien get here? Like, here? That far in your camp and then leave your castle? Like, this is probably coming after it anyway, even if you don't take it. So, basically all of that discussion was my way of saying, whenever your opponent pushes a pawn to a place that, seems like it can just be taken, make sure you calculate whether or not it can actually be taken, or whether you can just leave it. Because, as I said before, as I kept saying, pawn attacks, pawn sacrifices, there's a proverb which says, start the attack with a pawn sacrifice. They open lines, allow you to drop pawns, can be really dangerous, and a lot of tactics involved pawn drops, pawn pushes, and pawn sacrifices. So every time any 2 pawns meet, it would be good practice if you've got the time to try and figure out whether or not you should take it or leave it, or, yeah, those are your 2 options. Take it or leave it, basically. In this case, you have to take it, and she drops another pawn. In this case, you don't want to take it, because it just allows the knight in, and that's not great. So instead, she pushes this silver, and you can start to see this attack is starting to really build up. There's a lot of tension here. Now, once again, can you take this as black? Well, not really. If you took, you're just allowing this knight in, and it teams up with this pawn, and also allows this bishop in. Not that the bishop has any free squares to promote. This is covered, and this is covered, but hey, open diagonal. If this bishop were to ever move, then yeah, you could promote there. So that's not great if you take. So instead, black simply moves the rook, which you wanted to do anyway, because this is where it's at, aiming at the king's head. This is a quicker attack than all of this stuff over here. It's too thick over here. There's too many defenders. And so, well, white just says, hey, let's not do the move that I thought she was going to do and instead push a pawn, which obviously just gets taken. And then, yeah, pawn drop. I forgot about this, actually. This is a cool pawn drop, which you're about to see why this pawn drop was done. Once again, professional player sacrificing a pawn seemingly for no reason. Sometimes you don't really try and like learn anything from this. You just like accept that it's cool, and just move on with your life. What I will say is that, I mean, you're about to see why this pawn drop was done, and black took with the king, gold. This little sequence doesn't work if the gold is here, so I don't exactly know why, like what white was hoping to do if the gold took. But let's just not question it and just accept that this sequence ends up with a cool little check because of this king here, and it starts with obviously this capture, recapture, and the gold develops and makes way for this rook, and you can see here that like these pieces are really starting to gang up. I mean, already you've got 2 attackers and only 1 defender, so this pawn is about to fall. So of course, if you know anything about shogi, or especially chess, where pawns are even more important, you'd probably think immediately, hey, I should probably defend that pawn. Which is what she does. However, she did spend 74 minutes on this move. This is a 4-hour game, 4 hours each, 8-hour total. So she spent more than a quarter of her time total calculating this move. Fair to say that I did not even spend a tiny portion of that time calculating or analyzing why she played that move, or why it took her that long. So let's just like go ahead and assume that she had some real cool like thing that she was calculating, and just say that she's the professional and I'm the idiot. Anyway, point is, she took a long time to make this move, which seems simple, but let's not question it. Anyway, this is now defended, but hey, we can just add another attacker to that, so she does. And now you can't defend it anymore. The king can't come because of this, and I mean, the gold could come here, but it would just get taken. And there's nothing else to defend this pawn. Like, this can't defend it. This could actually defend it, but that looks disgusting. Removing your bishop from this nice attacking diagonal to put it here to defend a simple pawn. I mean, this isn't chess. Pawns aren't that important in shogi. Throw them out. You don't need them. No, instead, what she does is she goes for an attack, which is actually pretty strong, pretty quick. You can't allow this pawn any closer, and in fact, this drop already is like, sorry, this drop here is arrows, is already, oh, for fuck's there, is already pretty strong. Can't be taken. So the king has to run, so there's that. But you know, Yamane Kotomi, she wants to win. So does she defend? What do you think? So we get this series of trades taken with the rook. Why? Because at the end of all of it, boom, this comes with check. Getting a tempo. So before, when she dropped that pawn back here and the king stepped up, yeah, so now we see why this bishop, this whole massive exchange comes with check. And she's forced to block. You could step back, but that's probably pretty dangerous with a rook in hand. You know, just drop here or here, not there, because you lose your rook and lose the game. There or there or there or there or whatever. So she blocks instead. And maybe that's what she was going to do if the rook took. Like, you know, just have a nice rook. Yeah, whatever. Doesn't matter. Point is, king took. This was a check. Has to be blocked. So it's blocked by a pawn. This is still there, but it's defended, and it's defended, and it's defended. So nothing crazy happening yet. But this knight could come in. But this attack is left unresolved until it is resolved by this. So, sorry. Instant replay. Pawn, drop. Bring the king up closer to your own army. This rook drop. Aiming at this, has to be blocked somehow, but hey, let's chuck in an intermediary check, because that's really cool, and the king has to run away, and this looks really dangerous, so the king obviously runs away, another check, not really aiming to get this, because it's just quicker to just, you know, checkmate the king now that he's, you know, trapped on all sides. King is blocked in, by the three generals, but it still looks pretty dangerous. But now, finally, black plays a defensive move, kicking this rook away, but the rook was like, hey, I wanted to do that anyway, after this intermediary check, and take this lance, and attack this bishop. But then, yeah, a nice pawn drop. Remember, way back when I was talking about this random, like, pawn trade that occurred, and it just kicked the silver back, and then it seemed like nothing had changed, but then I'd said that, hey, this is potential, like, this file now has no pawns in it, and you can place a pawn there. It's called foreshadowing, because, hey, look, pawn, right in your face, and it's defended, and no matter what way you take, in this case silver, you just trade off, and then take the silver. Which is unpleasant, to say the very least. In fact, this is already a threat mate. In fact, it's 0 initiatives to mate, because it's a mate after you drop this silver. Like, that's just it. That's the ball game. That's mate. Now, obviously, you should defend this, you know, maybe play this, or you know, something. But, you know, white decides, nah, let's sack a bishop for a knight, and then throw down this lance that I just got, and then once the king moves out of the way, let's resign. Yep. So in this position, white's Yamane Kotomi resigned. And I know that sounds like an anticlimax, but I mean, look at this position. This is a mate. There's no place to run once this comes. Yeah, you can defend it. Probably. I mean, if we turn on the engine, plus 22, plus 19, plus 12, while this loads, it's not good. This king has way too much birth. If you do checkmate puzzles, you will realize that this king, well, it can't run this way at the moment, but it's got way too many options. Like, this entire area is like free for the king to bolt. So this is it's not going to be mated, is the point. It's too safe. The king is too slippery, and there's too much space here for this to be mated. It's just final checks, and the computer is even now saying, hey, sacrifice this lance for no reason. It can be taken two ways. And if the computer is trying to justify that as the best move, and while at the same time saying that it's plus 36, which is basically computer speak for its mate, except not forced. So when a computer is suggesting this instead of defend, like, you know that this is bad. So yeah, she just resigns. And I mean, that's the end of the game. That's black wins with a kind of a sudden win. I mean, the entire time this game, white was just attacking massively on the king side, on this side of the board, and it was Black's king the entire game, who looked like it was in danger. You had all these pieces lining up, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, an attack on White's king just kind of materialized based on this pawn, and this pawn drop here, which was allowable because of that earlier pawn exchange, which is quite destructive. Yeah, so attack materialized out of nowhere. And with that, the second game is over, and it is now a 2-0 lead for the old dog, Kana Satomi. So next game, Yamane Kotomi is going to have to win it. Otherwise, it is going to be the end of the match. And Kana Satomi will have won the title match. So I hope you'll all join me next time when I cover that game. And I hope you all enjoyed this particular recap and hopefully took something out of it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.